All right.
Okay. So, Steve, Al, and it's been a few weeks. We are at Steve's place, but we are eating, what is it, Bird
Biscuit.
biscuit. So, you can see the biscuit.
It's a biscuit sandwich. I've got chicken. It's
Got chicken, egg, cheese, and bacon.
they got chicken on that, or is it just?
Yeah, I said so. Oh no, it's just egg, cheese, and bacon.
They
Yeah.
do breakfast sandwiches and they do chicken sandwiches.
Yeah.
But I prefer the chicken sandwich when I go here. But yeah, it's very good. There's two locations, one on Koenig and one was the other one on Manor.
Manor. Yep.
So yeah, very good. But parking lot's full. Especially on the weekend. Crazy. If it's the weekend, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, he was talking about inflicting violence on people. If anybody noticed us talking about politics before we left, which nobody seemed to notice, but
well, let's when I said inflicting violence, maybe we could start off with that.
Yeah.
Because so the discussion began because I said, look, a lot of things have gone down in the last couple weeks since we last talked, and if we're here in a public place and somebody overhears us, and they decide to interrupt our conversation and have anything negative to say about what we're talking about, I said I didn't know what would stop me at this point from just punching somebody in the face, because it's gotten to that point where it just seems like there's just no rational discussion can be had, unfortunately. I know that that's probably not entirely true for just about everybody, and it probably needs to be on a case-by-case basis. But we've had this discussion in one of our previous segments where it's kind of like, you kind of reach this realization, if you're dealing with a narcissist who's pathological, or even somebody who's severely brainwashed, and they might not even have malignant intention, or even understand that they're gaslighting themselves. You cannot reason with these people. You cannot reason with a brainwashed person. They're not going to be capable of having any reasonable discussion, because any fact you present them, they're just going to move the goalpost back and say, well, I don't accept that fact because of X, Y, or Z. And then they'll give you a lie, and then you'll say that's a lie, and then you'll prove why it's a lie, but they won't accept it either. Because the cognitive dissonance that occurs when they have to accept reality, it completely obliterates their sense of self and ego and what they believe and who they are. And we talked about this before, it's a very disorientating situation for them. So they'd rather double down on their belief system than change their belief system. And unfortunately, at this juncture, it appears that the vast majority of people that are stuck in this cult, MAGA cult, they're hopeless. And I don't want to believe this. I don't want to believe it, but it could be true. And I've heard people say it. Individuals like that only are going to understand two things at this point, and that's ridicule and violence. Now, if you get enough people ridiculing them, they might succumb, because now they think the herd is against them and they want to join the herd. So if there's enough voices just pushing, they might transition over, just because that's how their psychology works. If that doesn't work, the only next step is violence, unfortunately. I'm not condoning violence. I don't say we have to go there. I'm not saying it's gotten to that point. Maybe, but you understand what I'm saying. So, yeah, unfortunately, at some point in time, I think a punch to the face to a bully is what stops them. Now, throughout history, people had said, well, nonviolent, passive, resistance and things like that work as well. And of course, that can be tried also. And I would definitely recommend that first. Go out and, in the streets to start protesting. I think there's one on Tuesday here in Austin. Probably. At the Capitol. I think it's nationwide at all the capitals in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday. If it's true, I'm going to look that up again. I read it somewhere. I'll probably end up going. Obviously do that. But, yeah, unfortunately, sometimes under extreme circumstances, who knows what the solution is. So anyways, okay, I'm just trying to tell you, Alan's coming out there saying violent. Yeah, no, this is what the discussion is.
But what this reminded me of, and this goes for people on all sides of the political spectrum. Let me put it this way. it seems like there's a desire to get away from politics, but it's harder than ever before. In other words, we'll tell each other, hey, let's not talk about politics. And the next thing you know, that same person is bringing up something very political.
Right.
So I have a probably still MAGA, but former friend who we literally, the last time we were getting along because we exclusively said, hey, let's not talk about politics. And then the next time he messaged me, he sent me 2 different things that he claimed weren't political, but they very, very, very much were. And when I called him on it, he gave what I called the Joe Rogan answer, where he said, oh, well, I'm just giving you information. Well, no, when you give information about certain topics, you're sending a message, you're giving propaganda to that message, and that's political, and I just cut him off at that point.
Right, and part of that discussion as well involved how, I had made in a previous segment a thing where things that I didn't think could be political became political, even innocuous statements. And then later in a different discussion, I brought up the fact that, at this point, everything is political. You can't remove it from just about any group setting or any group, work or wherever you might be, something political, because it has extended beyond just a disagreement on a policy. It's the policy itself we're disagreeing on. We're disagreeing on fundamental realities and core values. And when it gets to that point, there's no longer an attitude that should be taken where, well, let's just disagree to disagree, because someone's getting hurt on either end of the spectrum there. And you can't just disagree on something that's harmful to yourself or others. There has to be a resolution. Now, to what extent is that hurting you, and you just let it go and say, you know what, it's not worth that fight? It's up to you, I guess, or it's up to a society or a group to determine whether or not they're just going to let something slide. And sometimes, in my world, let it go. Yeah, okay, I can tolerate this much abuse, but
that's part of the problem, though, is that if you have, say, one thing coming up per day, then you can usually let it slide. But if you have 5 different people trying to argue with you in a given day, one of those you're going to snap back on or try and engage, or otherwise you can't just ignore everything, is my point.
Right, and like I said, it also, for me, it depends on what is the argument on. Mm-hmm. If it's, like I said, something that, let it go. Doesn't matter. But obviously the most innocuous being, hey, should I have a chicken or should we have, fish?
Yeah, egg and bacon. Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
We're not going to argue about that.
Right.
Or if we do, it's going to be a fun little debate. Eagles or bears.
Right.
Who cares? Some people take that even farther. That's ridiculous. But you understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so to me, it's point by point, not so much the volume.
But it's also person by person. If I have a discussion with a random person that I've never met on the internet, I can probably ignore them, block them, whatever. But if it's family, coworker, friend, neighbor, somebody I have to interact with on a daily basis, even if it's somebody at the grocery store who I might have to interact with again in physical space, all of a sudden now I actually have to do something about this.
Right. And I think, unfortunately, as things get more and more heated, there is going to be more and more instances of people just unleashing on each other. And, whether or not that's a good thing, at this point, I think people are going to have to make a stand. Like, what side are you on? And, once again, I think it's this bully mentality where people will say, you're overreacting. It's not as bad as you think. Don't get so worked up. It's going to harm you. That's exactly what a bully says. That's exactly what an abuser says. And I don't think it's overreacting at this point when we see what's happening with Musk in the White House, when we see what's happening with Trump, when we see with him aligning with Putin, which was so obvious in this last debacle at the White House, when they brought Zelensky in to team up on him and bully him the way that was. And that'd probably be a discussion we'll have. Maybe in this intro, we'll just kind of leave it at this and then move on to a topic. But I think, we're coming out of here just kind of basically saying about what do we do from here? Like, how do we move forward at this point? I don't believe it's an overreaction.
Well, and I was listening on NPR just yesterday to Tim Walz, and he actually brought up that exact point where he said people accuse him of overreacting, and he hopes that he's overreacting.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't think he's overreacting, but he would give his left testicle
Or
if he-
arm,
to actually be overreacting. And
on something like this, I'm sorry to interrupt, but on something like this, it might be important to overreact,
Right.
when the stakes are this high,
right.
which is basically any resemblance of a democracy that we had or we're trying to get to is completely obliterated. And if people haven't recognized that at this point, then I mean that's one of the biggest problems is this delusion that we've lived in a democracy that was
But we at least had the illusion. We at least had a semblance. We had something.
Right.
It's kind of like the functional alcoholic.
Yes.
It might have been
We haven't
in
addressed-
tatters, but
yeah.
it was still kind of there.
Right, and we were trying to move towards a more inclusive society, and the trajectory was headed in that direction. But here we are, back to square, make America great again, and it's a tell-all. When you hear things like, "Oh, Antifa is bad, so you're for fascism," "Woke is bad, so you're for not reading books and having enlightenment and understanding and empathy, so you're against that." You're against understanding structural and racism and bigotry, and just look up the definition of woke in the dictionary, or Google whatever you want, and look what it says. Well, how they define it is something different because it's just them not wanting to accept reality and be empathetic. And then another thing. So you have the woke. So they want to make America great again. They're for fascism. They're against wokeism. So basically, they're fascists, racists, and they're ignorant.
Yep.
Who don't like people, who hate what will soon be the majority of this country. So yeah, that's what we're standing with. This is what we're against, and it's a tell-all. They literally tell you what they're doing when they say these words, and when you tell them to describe it, they can't define it correctly.
If at all.
And then when you start, once again, I said this cognitive dissonance. Well, they start getting angry, and then they call you snowflake, and that you're overreacting. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, you know what? That's like a woman getting assaulted, and you say, well, you wore that dress, you should have known better. Zelensky.
Right.
And Zelensky, yeah, you should have wore a suit. So I deserve to be bullied and be like he told those guys. We'll have that discussion, or don't worry about it. Calm down. Yeah, just go ahead and enjoy the assault. It'll be over soon.
I know we keep referencing it and then not talking directly, but Trump and Vance literally yelling at Zelensky and then saying, we didn't raise our voices. We didn't raise our voices.
Yeah.
Right after they did. Seconds after they did.
Gaslighting. Telling that person's reality doesn't exist. When Trump is going to start World War III with what he's doing, because he's aligning himself against Europe and North, Central, and South America and also Australia, he's lining himself against the world outside of, Russia, and I don't know who else possibly. He's the one starting World War III. But we'll get into that discussion. I think this is where we can kind of cut it off, I guess. We're
Okay.
already, but yeah, so this will be part one.
Okay.
It's going to be very interesting to see where this goes from here.